So not that long ago, the world was holding its breath. The US and Iran were in a standoff in the Strait of Hormuz, and things looked bad. Then suddenly, a ceasefire was announced and, well, everyone exhaled. But what if that sigh of relief was a little too soon? What if the story we were all told was a carefully crafted lie? Let's decode this.
Right. This was the headline you saw everywhere on April 7th, 2026. After weeks of really intense conflict, it seemed like diplomacy had pulled us back from the brink. You saw oil prices plunge, markets rallied. It really felt like a global disaster had been narrowly avoided.
But here's the thing. What if that whole story, the peace, the diplomacy, was just a cover for something else? Something not about saving the world, but about saving and making absolute fortunes. That's the real story we're going to dig into today.
Okay, so first, let's just quickly go over the official version of events. This simple, comforting narrative that everybody was fed.
The public story was pretty straightforward, right? After 40 brutal days of a conflict known as Operation Epic Fury, Pakistan heroically steps in and brokers a 2-week ceasefire. Almost immediately, oil prices just plummeted, and Pakistan's prime minister was suddenly being hailed as this global peacemaker. All very clean, a simple diplomatic victory.
But the real reason this deal happened? It wasn't about a sudden change of heart or a breakthrough in diplomacy. No, it was about cold, hard economics. The global economy was literally at its breaking point.
And to really get the pressure everyone was under, you have to understand the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, this isn't just some waterway. It's the jugular vein of the global energy supply. When you shut it down, it isn't a regional issue. It is a full-blown global catastrophe.
And that is exactly what happened. 20 million barrels of oil gone from the daily market, just vanished overnight. The International Energy Agency literally called it the single most significant supply shock in history. This wasn't a disruption, you guys. This was like a heart attack for the world's economy.
And here's what that heart attack looked like. Oil skyrockets from a stable $85 a barrel to over $120. That kind of spike was threatening to kick off a global recession. In the US, gas prices were climbing towards $7 a gallon. Europe was facing a massive energy crisis. The economic pain was just becoming completely unbearable. So if it wasn't about peace, then what was it really about? Well, as they say, you follow the money. And when you do, a very, very different picture starts to emerge. Now just look at this timeline. 4 days before any ceasefire is announced, traders start making enormous bets that the price of oil is about to fall. We're talking a 340% surge in these put options. While that's happening, secret back-channel calls are going on between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And then, boom, April 7th, the deal is announced, oil crashes, and those traders, they walk away with billions.
And that's the whole point right there. This wasn't a market breathing a sigh of relief. This was the market reacting to a perfectly timed announcement that a few key players were already positioned for. It was a trade, plain and simple, just executed on a massive geopolitical scale.
So why were the Saudis so desperate for a deal? Well, their massive $2.8 trillion sovereign wealth fund was bleeding $3 to $4 billion every single day the strait was closed. Their entire economic vision was at risk. This was never about regional stability. It was about their balance sheet.
But see, to stop the financial bleeding, all they needed was an announcement, not necessarily a reality. And this is the most damning piece of evidence. Despite the big announcement, almost no oil tankers are actually going through the strait. Iran's conditions for passage are so ridiculous that ships are still taking the long, expensive way around Africa. The supply shock hasn't been fixed at all. The entire ceasefire is an illusion. So why would they go through all the trouble of creating this elaborate illusion? Because it gives every major player involved exactly what they need, at least in the short term. You could almost call it a conspiracy of convenience.
Let's just break it down. The US gets to claim a big diplomatic win and, more importantly, lower gas prices right before midterm elections. Pakistan gets to look like a global peacemaker, which gives them huge geopolitical leverage, maybe even some IMF aid. Saudi Arabia, of course, stops the multi-billion-dollar bleeding. And Iran? They get a much-needed time out to regroup after taking some serious military hits. Everybody gets a win, so long as no one asks too many questions.
Okay, so if this whole thing is just an illusion, the big question is, how long can it possibly last? And what should we be watching for as it inevitably starts to crumble? So right now, you've got two completely different stories playing out. The headlines are all talking about peace, progress, and diplomacy. But the options market, where the really big money places its bets, that's telling a totally different story. It's actually pricing in a return to over $110 a barrel of oil by May. That tells you the smart money thinks this ceasefire is a joke.
So what does all this mean for you? Well, first, don't trust this market rally. The underlying risks are all still there. Second, keep a very close eye on Pakistan. Their new status as a major power broker is going to shake up regional politics. And most importantly, pay attention to what the institutional money is doing in the options market, not just what the news is saying.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty fundamental and kind of scary question. In a world where massive geopolitical events can be engineered for financial gain, and the news is just another tool in that strategy, how do we ever really know what's real? Who can you actually trust?
You know, in a world where markets can swing 13% because of a single announcement, financial controls aren't just a good idea, they're existential. AI-powered trading absolutely needs guardrails. Our sponsor, YSISafe, provides things like non-custodial spending limits and audit trails to protect portfolios from exactly the kind of volatility we've just been talking about. You can check them out at YSISafe.com.